I'm 54 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I had it all sorted out like a puzzle with every piece in place. But one rainy day in a car changed everything, cracking open feelings I didn't know were still inside me. I worked hard, kept my heart safe, and told myself that real, messy love was for younger women with more time on their hands. My marriage ended quietly 10 years ago, and since then, I've just been getting by. I thought I was okay with that. I kept things neat, predictable, and professional. But what happened that day in the car? It cracked something open in me. I didn't even know was still alive. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake I did. It started on a Thursday, the kind that feels like it's dragging its feet just to spite you. The office was stuffy. The printer jammed for the third time. And my boss had one of those moods where even breathing too loudly might spark a lecture. I stayed later than usual, tying up loose ends like always. That's who I've always been. Dependable, meticulous, invisible in all the right ways. His son Ryan had been in the building that afternoon. He was helping with some issue in the main conference room. Something about a network security upgrade. I'd seen him around maybe 3 or 4 times before. Mid-30s, tall, lean, the kind of man who seems too young to be that self-assured. He had his mother's eyes, warm brown, but sharper at the corners. Kind, but observant. He didn't just look at you. He saw you. As I gathered my bag and coat. The hallway lights flickered low. Motion sensors reminding me I was the last one there. Ryan appeared just then, locking the server room. "You heading out?" he asked. I nodded. Finally. I think I've been fighting that printer longer than it took Edison to invent the light bulb. He laughed. A genuine deep laugh that felt good to hear after the silence of the empty office. "You parked far?" he asked. "Other side of the lot. My usual spot under the flickering lamp." He glanced out the window. The clouds had rolled in thick and fast. Rain tapped gently on the glass, threatening something heavier. "Let me give you a ride," he said, already walking toward the exit with that casual confidence some men carry without knowing it. "It's dark and starting to pour." I hesitated. It wasn't that I was uncomfortable. I wasn't. But it felt different. Something about the offer about him made me pause just a second longer than normal. "You sure?" I asked, fine to sound light. He turned, offered a small shrug and smile. I wouldn't offer if I wasn't. So I followed him. His car was clean and smelled faintly of cedar and leather. He adjusted the heat the moment I got in, like he already knew the office turned into a refrigerator after hours. It was thoughtful, not overbearing, just nice. We pulled out of the lot, the windshield wipers moving rhythmically against the growing rain. "You always stay that late?" he asked. I glanced at him. "Someone has to." He smirked. "That's what my dad always says." I laughed under my breath. Well, he's not wrong. He just usually says it while walking out the door an hour earlier. We both laughed then, and the silence that followed wasn't awkward. It felt easy. A conversation kept flowing about work, about music, about nothing and everything. He told me about his side projects, his cabin he was fixing up near the lake. I mentioned how I used to sketch when I was younger, how life got too busy for it. I don't know why I told him that. I hadn't even thought about it in years. At one point at a stoplight, he looked over at me in that way again. Not flirtatious, not overly intense, just present. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if you hadn't taken the safe path?" he asked softly. It was a simple question, but it hit me in a place I hadn't touched in years. I looked out the window. The rain had softened into a mist. The street, lights casting everything in a gentle golden hue. "All the time," I said. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than he should. We reached my place quicker than I expected. I pointed toward the driveway. "This one here," I said. He pulled in, kept the car running, but didn't rush the goodbye. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. "Thanks for the ride," I said, reaching for the handle. He touched my arm lightly, just 2 fingers barely there, but it made me pause. "I meant it, you know," he said quietly, "about not always taking the safe path." And there was something in his voice, gentle but certain, that made my chest tighten. I gave a faint nod and got out, stepping into the cool air. As I walked to my front door, I felt his eyes on me, not in a way that made me self-conscious, but in a way that made me feel seen. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't sure what I was walking away from, or what I might be walking toward. I didn't sleep much that night. I laid there staring at the ceiling, listening to the occasional creak of the house settling, and the soft tick of the clock on my nightstand, but my mind was elsewhere. Back in that car, back in that pause before I opened the door, and the weight of Ryan's words echoing in my ears about not always taking the safe path. It wasn't even what he said, really. It was the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about careers or hobbies, like he meant me, like he saw something in me I'd spent years hiding under a polished, practical life. The next morning, I wore a soft navy sweater I hadn't touched in years. It clung a little too much at the waist, but it brought out the color in my eyes and made me feel something close to vibrant. I told myself it was silly that no one would notice, but part of me hoped Samioy didn't expect to see Ryan again so soon. But when I stepped out for lunch and headed toward the cafe around the corner, there he was, sitting on the bench outside, with a coffee in hand, scrolling on his phone like he belonged to the scene. He looked up just as I passed. Well, fate strikes again. I raised an eyebrow, smiling despite myself. This cafe has great sandwiches. Fate's got nothing to do with it. Sure, he said, standing and tossing his cup. Mind some company. We ended up sitting at a small table by the window. It wasn't a date, but it didn't feel like just lunch either. He asked questions, real ones, about my job, about my daughter who lived across the country, about what I did on weekends when no one was asking anything of me. Asterisk, I told him how I used to love going to art museums alone, how I'd get lost in paintings, and imagine who the people were, what they felt when the brush touched canvas. I told him how I hadn't done that in years, how life had become full of errands and groceries, and the quiet routines you grow into like an old pair of shoes. And Ryan listened, not with the distracted nods I was used to from men who just waited for their turn to talk. He leaned in, asked follow-ups, made me feel like my life was still interesting, still worth being curious about. When we finished, I started to reach for my wallet, but he stopped me. "My treat," he said with a warm grin. "I owe you for the office entertainment yesterday." "You mean my epic battle with the printer?" I laughed. "That's the one," he said. "Legendary." As we stepped outside, the wind had picked up and tossed my hair across my face. He reached up without thinking and gently brushed it back, fingers grazing my temple just for a second too long. I froze, not out of fear, but because something shifted in me. Something unspoken passed between us in that moment. A pulse of awareness. A ripple. He cleared his throat and stepped back. "Sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be." There was a silence. It wasn't awkward, but it asked a question neither of us said out loud. He looked at me then, and his voice was quieter than before. "Would you ever want to? I don't know. Do something. Not just lunch at a cafe you happen to walk by." I opened my mouth, then closed it. It wasn't because I didn't want to. It was because I did, and that scared me. Ryan was my boss's son, younger, not by a generation, but enough for people to raise eyebrows. I could already hear them. Co-workers, old friends, my own inner critic whispering, "You should know better." But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about any of them. I was thinking about how alive I felt, how seen I felt. So I nodded. Okay. His smile widened. Not triumphant, not cocky, just happy. "I'll text you," he said. And he did. Later that night, as I stood in the kitchen with a glass of wine, staring out at the quiet street, my phone lit up. One simple message. "You free Saturday?" I stared at it for a long time and then I typed back. Yes. I didn't know where this path would lead, but for once I wasn't looking for the safest turn. Saturday came faster than I expected. I spent the morning fussing over what to wear, which was absurd, because we'd agreed to keep it casual. Ryan had said something about driving out to the lake, grabbing food from a little roadside diner he loved. But still, I stood in front of the mirror for too long, trying on different blouses, stepping in and out of jeans, fussing with my hair until I just laughed at myself. I finally settled on a soft cotton shirt, fitted enough to feel flattering, but relaxed enough to look like I wasn't trying. Which of course I was a little. He pulled into my driveway right on time. His car gleamed in the early afternoon sun, and he stepped out wearing a navy flannel over a white t-shirt, a slight breeze catching his hair. He looked like a postcard version of himself, natural, effortless. "You look," he paused, his gaze taking me in. "Amazing." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "So do you," I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. The drive out to the lake was peaceful. The highway rolled out in front of us, flanked by early summer trees, just beginning to bloom in full. The radio played quietly, something acoustic and soft. We didn't talk much at first, but the silence was easy, companionable. Eventually, I asked about the lake. "It's not much," he said. "Just a place my mom used to take us when we were kids. There's this tiny dock no one really uses anymore. Thought you might like it." I did. When we got there, it was even quieter than I imagined. The lake shimmered under the pale blue sky, the water still and untouched except for the occasional ripple from a passing breeze. The dock stretched out like a forgotten road, weathered but steady. We walked to the edge and sat down, letting our legs dangle over. For a while we just listened. Birds overhead, the distant rustle of trees, the creak of the old dock beneath. "Yustok, why did you bring me here?" I asked gently. Ryan didn't answer right away. He looked out across the water, his fingers idly tracing the wood beside him. "I guess," he said slowly, "because you remind me of this place." I turned to him, puzzled. "It's quiet, beautiful, and overlooked by people who don't know how to really see it." The words hit me in a way I didn't expect. I looked down at my hands, my breath catching just a little. "You have a way of saying things that cut right through," I said softly. He looked at me, then really looked. "Do you want me to stop?" "No," I whispered. "Not yet." We sat like that for a long time, just being there. The sunlight shifted and turned, golden as late afternoon crept in. At some point I leaned into him without even thinking, and he didn't move away. His arm brushed mine, and the warmth of him settled into my skin like it belonged there. Eventually, he turned toward me. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. I nodded. "Why do you keep yourself so closed off?" That made me pause. I think I began because for a long time no one asked to see anything deeper, and it was easier not to offer. He watched me closely, his expression unreadable. "But I want to," I added. "Now maybe with you." That was when he reached for my hand. Not forcefully, just a soft open gesture. I'd let him take it. "I'm not trying to rush anything," he said quietly. But I see you, and I like what I see. My throat tightened, not because I didn't believe him, but because part of me finally did. We stayed until the sky turned soft pink. On the drive home, we didn't talk much, but the silence had changed. It was heavier, warmer. Something had shifted and we both felt it. When he pulled up to my place, he turned off the engine but didn't move. I unbuckled my seatbelt and glanced at him. I had a good time, I said. Me too, a beat past. I'm not sure what this is, I said, my voice low. But I know it's not nothing. He leaned in slightly, not for a kiss, just to be closer. It's not nothing, he said. It's the start of something if we let it be. I nodded, then opened the door. Before I stepped out, I turned back. Ryan, yeah, thank you for seeing me. He smiled, not with his lips, but with his whole face. And that night, when I went to bed, the quiet no longer felt lonely. It felt full. The days that followed were quiet, but not the kind of quiet I'd known before. It was a quieter inside me, like a settling, like something had finally been named after years of pretending. I didn't need to feel anything more than content, and now that I had, I couldn't go back. Ryan and I didn't see each other for a few days. Work was busy. Life got in the way, as it tends to do. But we texted. Nothing dramatic, nothing over the top, just check-ins, shared thoughts, the kind of messages that made me smile quietly to myself over coffee in the morning. It was midweek when he asked if he could stop by. He had a reason. He said he left something in the office that he needed help finding, but we both knew that wasn't really it. He showed up just after sunset. I'd lit a few candles around the living room, more out of habit than intention, but the warm glow suited the mood. I had on my softest sweater and a pair of jeans that had seen better years, but fit like memory. When I opened the door, he looked tired but lit up the moment he saw me. Hey, he said, stepping in. Hope this isn't too late. Not at all, I said. You want tea or something stronger? He smiled. Tea sounds perfect, actually. We sat on a couch, mugs in hand, and let the quiet stretch between us again. Comfortable now, familiar, like we'd known each other longer than we had. Then he asked, Do you ever regret not doing more for yourself sooner? The question wasn't meant to hurt, but it struck deep. I set my mug down and thought for a moment. Sometimes, I admitted, I spent a lot of years building a life that looked good on the outside. Reliable job, a stable routine, a clean kitchen and bills paid on time. But I left parts of myself behind to do it. The curious parts, the passionate parts, the brave parts. He nodded slowly. But they're still in there. I think they are, I said. They just needed someone to remind me. He looked at me then, eyes soft and steady. I'm not trying to save you if that's what you think. I know, I said quietly. But you made me remember I'm allowed to want something. Even if it's messy, even if it doesn't fit neatly into everyone else's expectations. The space between us narrowed, not in distance, but in understanding. He reached out again, gently, taking my hand. This time I didn't hesitate. I don't want to be something you regret, he said. And I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything. I just want to be in whatever this is with you, wherever it goes. My heart ached in that warm, expanding way that only comes from hearing. Exactly what you didn't realize you needed. Neither of us knows what comes next, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid to find out. He leaned in then slowly, asking the question, not with words, but with presence. And when our lips met, it wasn't fireworks or grand music. It was something quieter, deeper, like a sigh after holding your breath for years. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. The kiss ended, but the moment didn't. We stayed close, our foreheads touching, our hands still gently clasped like we were holding something fragile between us. Later, after he left, I stood by the window and watched the taillights disappear down the street. I felt a mix of wonder and fear because starting again at 54 isn't easy. There are no blueprints for this kind of thing, no guarantees. But there was something else too. Hope, real quiet hope. I'd spent too long letting life happen around me. And now, for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step into it again. Not as someone's employee, not as someone's ex-wife, not even as someone's mother, but as me. And maybe, just maybe, that was